Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 104. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest in Montana, Alex Fichtler. Alex, how are you, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. I've been looking forward to this for a while. This has been a work in progress, and I don't quite remember where I first came across your page, although I think it was through Andrew Shelley, who is a previous guest on the podcast, episode 62. And I believe you know Andrew, correct?
I do. Yeah, I worked with him via 10,000, and I think that was right. They did a feature for a strength event that I did, and I think that was like shortly thereafter.
Do you remember the quote that was in the video that they made of you? Because I think there was a quote now that really stood out to me where you were in a video. All right,
yeah,
we'll have to.
My
head. I'm the self-proclaimed king of quotes, so I'll have to circle back and figure that one out.
Sounds good.
For now, for people listening to this episode who don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, a pleasure to be here. Honestly, like I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and kind of like put myself out there and talk to you because I just want to say too before I get into my who I am that like I think what you're doing with like just moving towards hard things and like really pushing that envelope for people and like kind of projecting that like mentality of do hard things, I think is phenomenal. And it's exactly what the country needs right now. And I'm a big proponent of it myself. Hence the reason we're talking, as you already said. So thank you for that. And thank you for the opportunity. Again, my name is Alex Fichtler. I was born and raised in Montana. I was, again, born in the Missoula area, and I grew up on 320 acres up in the woods. So I had a pretty phenomenal childhood, if you could think about it, from a lot of kids out there. And I grew up in just playing guns and just playing in the dirt. And I remember like one of my favorite pictures is me as a kid. I was just eating dirt from a pile of dirt. My dad built our house, and it kind of sums up my childhood of playing out in the mountains. But I grew up with an amazing family, like a great father, a great brother. I'm one of three brothers actually in the middle. So I was kind of a bruiser the whole time. I have three kids now too. So I'm fully aware of like, childhood with three kids and stuff like that. And just like middle child syndrome is a real thing. So I grew up in the atmosphere, and it was fantastic. My dad was a vet, and that kind of pushed me into my career there afterwards. So growing up, I went to college, and I kind of had interesting time in college. Interesting because I was kind of bouncing around. I didn't really have a lot of direction and desire. The wars were kicking at that point in time, and I really wanted to go do what I've always wanted to do, which was be a SEAL. Ever since I can remember, that was kind of like my lifelong goal. And again, going back to my dad being a vet, he would tell me some stories and stuff like that. His interaction with SEALs on his ships. He was in the Navy, not a SEAL, but still like had interactions with them. And I just like, I glommed onto that of like, those are the guys that I want to be a part of. Like the guys doing the cool, sneaky stuff. You know what I mean? And the more I dove into it, the more I was kind of like, that's the path for me. And I knew if I was going to serve, I wanted to be with the best. So from a lifelong, journey and desire, I wanted to be a SEAL. And so I grew up, went to college, decided like wars are going, I got to get into this, while, my time's hot, and I was 21 at the time, and joined the Navy. And then I had a great career in the SEAL teams, and then got out, and I've been transitioning ever since. And like I said, I have kids and a life, and I'm divorced, and have a whole story of things that kind of I went through that were challenges and struggles of my own and stuff like that. But that is kind of like my quick backstory in a nutshell.
Yeah, there's a lot I want to ask about, and I almost think that the best place to start would just be with the first big question of the podcast, and then
Sure.
we will follow that wherever it takes us. But when you look back at your life, and you already mentioned a lot of hard things in there, What's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you didn't get to choose completely for yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. And looking at those questions, I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, there's a lot of situations, that they're hard situations that I didn't choose. Obviously, I might put myself in situations where they were inevitable, and that's fine. I think it actually is a great thing for people when they find themselves in those hard situations. But to get to the point of the question, was put some thought into it, and I really think that and it's a broad answer, but loss is probably the hardest thing, and being a SEAL, right? Like going through like combat and stuff like that. I mean, whether it's direct loss, like in your hands, or it's loss to teammates that were apart from you but still brothers in the fight, or friends, family, right? Like I've dealt with all of it, and it's the hardest thing to go through, man. Honestly, like understanding how to like get through that trauma that you experience, whether you're in the thick of it or you're just experience it, secondhand. It's a very, very challenging thing to deal with. And I think a lot of people go through that in life, right? A lot of people go through their own breed of loss, right? And whether it be loss of an individual, a loss of a dog, even, or even loss of yourself, man. And even going to loss of yourself, man, that's another category too that like I felt like I had right coming out of the military, right? So again, broad answer, but loss would be it. And I think that trying to overcome that and having the understanding that that's part of life, right? And they kind of use the unknown and the fear going into that to like better yourself and understand that, hey, this is a process, and I can seek community, seek people outside of myself to like help you through those. That was probably the ongoing challenges, right? I still deal with some of that kind of stuff today, and it's one of those things where it's the hardest struggle for sure, like dealing with that kind of stuff and putting yourself out there for people, and understanding how you can cope and move along with it. So
I really appreciate that answer. And I would love to look at that through the lens of losing people that you care about
for
and
sure.
also losing yourself, something that I
Yeah.
think we could all relate to. So, when it comes to your time in the SEALs, take
Mhm.
us back to when you first joined the Navy SEALs. How old were you?
I was 21 when I joined. Yeah. I was 21, and then I was going through training and stuff thereafter, and I had a 9-year career in the teams.
Okay, so 21 to 30 roughly. In that time span, when did you feel like you were finally able to come to terms with what it meant to lose somebody and how to process that? And maybe that's a bad question because I'm not sure if anybody ever comes to full terms with that.
Yeah, no, again, a really good question. But looking at it, actually started right before I joined, oddly enough. So when I was getting ready to leave for the Navy, I was actually working at a job, working at a Helly Hansen, actually here in Bozeman, Montana, and the owners were phenomenal people. They really were. I'm
Mhm.
still like loose friends with one of them. But speaking of loss, his wife, actually one of the co-founders, passed away unexpectedly, and she was a good friend of mine at the time, and it really tore me up, man. And it was one of those things that it was my first experience losing somebody that was close to me, that was a friend that I had daily interactions with outside of family, right? I mean, everyone loses grandparents and things like that. And that's one of those situations where you know it's coming eventually, right? Like you know that you can kind of internally prep, I guess, in some to some degree for that level of loss. But when you lose somebody that's close to you unexpectedly, it's really hard. It's really hard. And I went through that. She was actually in an unstable state, after she had a heart attack, and was in the hospital and ended up being in a bad spot, and ended up passing after the fact. But I was able to go see her and all that kind of stuff. And it was a really profound moment, and it actually set me up for that, I guess, ability to process that. And I had my family around me, and I'm not shy to like hold in my feelings and stuff like that. And I would, like, anybody listening, I would absolutely tell them, don't be, right, seek community outside of it, and really like get the help you need, I guess you could say. It goes to mental health as a whole, but like just processing and stuff like that, people are there for you, and they're going to listen. So I had that around me. And then going into the SEAL teams, you've learned very on going through buds, and the instructors were phenomenal. Every single one of my instructors were combat SEALs, right? Like combat vets coming off of Iraq deployments and stuff like that, when it was really, really hot, right? So very early on, you come to glimpse with what war is, right? And I was not unaware of that going into it in any way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? But you come very close, without experiencing directly via your instructors you look up to, and they're mentoring you in a very hard way, to put it lightly. But you learn very often and very frequently, I would say, just like to be able to handle that, right, and understand the consequences of what's going to happen, and whether it be the consequences of your own actions or the consequences of combat. Period. It's always out there, and it's never easy to deal with. And just because you feel like you're ready for it doesn't make it easier, but it definitely sets you up for the realities that you're about to face. And I feel like going through training was actually the first time that I felt, I guess, some level of understanding towards what I was in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, people listening to this podcast can't see you at the moment, but I made a comment before we hit record about your beard. You have a phenomenal beard. And,
Thank you very much.
if anybody goes to your social media, someone sees you were a Navy SEAL, you are in shape, you've got the beard, you don't look like somebody who would be open to talking about their feelings and their
Yeah.
emotions and opening up. And I'm almost wondering if that's a misconception about what it's like to be a Navy SEAL. Are a lot of the guys willing to open up and talk about those kind of things, or are you an exception to the norm?
No, I would say honestly, man. Again, dude, great question, dude. Definitely getting into it, and I appreciate it. I think that every single one of us as operators, and I'm not strictly speaking to SEALs, we definitely come into it, and it takes a certain type of individual and a certain type of man to make it through and shoulder the weight that we do on a daily basis, and I mean physical and mental, right? And I think through that it breeds the kind of stature and character that you're kind of like leaning towards there,
Mm.
which again I appreciate. But it definitely can give off that external perspective of, this guy's a hard ass. I don't want to talk to him. And actually, I can get to it later on too, but there's a lot of times I run through these courses with the Defense Strategies Group, which my good friend Michael Dowd runs. And we do these leadership development courses. And there's a whole crew of us that are all special operators, whether it be all SEALs or Green Berets, Rangers, so on and so forth. And well, I definitely have the best beard out of all of them. Quote me on that. No, but they all come to us and they're like, "Oh man, like all these guys going through the course, like we really thought we're like in for a beating here. We thought you guys would be unapproachable." And every single time, guys come up with like, "You guys were the opposite of what I anticipated," which I really appreciate hearing, because like we may give off the exterior of that we're a bunch of hard asses, and we can be. And don't get me wrong, that's absolutely part of our demeanor and our personality. But when it comes down to it, whether it be internal to our community or external, like I'm always here to talk. You know what I mean? I love meeting new people, love having community and all that kind of stuff, as I've talked about before. But really just being that individual that's confident enough in yourself to be able to like open up and talk to people, right? And whether it be starting a new conversation with somebody you don't know, or just being open up to a buddy or an individual that's going through a hard time, and having the confidence within yourself again to be able to be that individual that, projects confidence and actually gives them the sense of maybe initially like lack of security in it, but then you open up, it gives them that security. And it's like, this guy gets it. And he can talk to me, I can talk to him, and he's not this hard shell of a human being. He actually, is pretty deep inside. And I'm not necessarily saying that for myself, but I think that all of us have that capability, and we're definitely more open internally than we are, especially depending on the topic of conversation. But I would definitely say that every one of us, at least the community that I hold close, are definitely open to that conversation and able to talk. So
Yeah. Is it fair to say that most SEALs are confident human beings?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, you have to be. There's definitely no wiggle room for that in the community. I mean, if you lack even an ounce of confidence in yourself and your capabilities or your desire to be better, you're going to get weeded out like right off the bat. And even if you're in the community at that point and like it's found, it's like blood in the water for sharks. You know what I mean? Like we're going to get after it and we're going to get you out one way or another.
Yeah.
So,
I would imagine that most people walking into buds have a good amount of confidence. I think you probably have to put yourself willingly in that situation.
100%. Yeah.
However, I would also imagine that you continue to build confidence throughout your time in the SEALs. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. The better you get is definitely with time and experience comes more confidence in the things you do. And I think that, just speak to that really quick, when you gain that confidence, I think sometimes, I'm not speaking for myself or others necessarily, but there can be that sense of like, I'm comfortable in my situation. And that's where danger creeps in. And that's like getting yourself out of your comfort zone and like finding an area you're not confident in and building the confidence back up. And that's what makes a well-rounded human being, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. And now there are a lot of people listening to this who will never and have no desire to become a Navy SEAL. I'm sure most people listening to this. But the concept of building confidence, I think, is applicable to everybody. And so if you had to take your time in the SEALs and outside and
Mhm.
just say, this is how I've built confidence. Is there a recipe? Is there a formula? Is there a strategy there?
The that's a hard question, I would say, because I think that the situation is going to dictate that a little bit. But what I would say right off the bat is come into anything that you're maybe lacking confidence in, or you have the fear of understanding that every single person that has come into a situation, either that situation or a different situation, has been in the exact same position that you're in. Not a single person from Muhammad Ali to anybody else that's a professional, the best in the world, has ever gone into something and been like, I'm the shit right off the bat, right? And I am the best, I'm gonna be the best. And that right there is ego and arrogance. You know what I mean? If a person comes into that, and that will get stamped out of you and the teams immediately, and not in a good way. But it really comes down to your humility as a human being too, and understanding that, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared of this, but I'm here, right? I've committed myself to do this, and having that internal self talk, that positive self talk, to like say that to yourself and be like, I can do this. I'm going to get into this. And that's just self talk of confidence, right? I mean, you can lie to yourself all day, but guess what? Your mind's going to believe it if you tell yourself enough. So going into it with that level of just self talk and confidence to begin with, and then having the humility to be able to fail, right? And understanding that your failures are not the end of it. And actually, I wanted to bring up, to speak to that, there was a quote from, I think, Lewis Howes, that said that there was babies will learn to or will try to walk like 1,000 times, right? You may have heard this, but like, and they're never going to sit there once and say like, this isn't for me, right? And I loved it so much. I was like, that's exactly right, because every single person is going to fail at something, but you got to just keep going. You know what I mean? Is keep taking a step forward. Even if you take a step back, take another step forward, and you keep going. And those little movements and the humility and the lack of ego in something, but just being positive to yourself, is going to build that confidence for you in anything that you do.
Yeah, I agree. And to add on to that, I would also say, use the word commitment. And I think doing what we said we were going to do and keeping the
Mm-hmm.
promises we made to ourselves and showing up for that, showing up for us, I think that's a big piece of it. And then also doing hard things, that's what you and I
100%.
both care about. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a confidence that can only come, a certain confidence that can only come from doing something that you once thought maybe you couldn't and proving
Yeah,
yourself right. Yeah.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that working through those challenges from an individual standpoint, and then I think there's so many people that are probably listening, and then others that hopefully will in the future, right, that have always dreamed of doing something that they wanted to do, and maybe they did lack that confidence, that like just taking the initial step and holding yourself accountable. You said it perfectly, right? Just holding yourself accountable to what you set in front of you. And I do it on a daily basis, right? Like my physical fitness is one of those things. Being a good father is one of those things, right? And I'm not the best at any of them by any stretch of the imagination, but it's always committing yourself to saying, hey, I'm going to do this, right? And maybe I don't want to work out that day. There's plenty of days I don't, but I at least get out there and I put in the work. You know what I mean? And that's the key to like the confidence and the commitment that you take, is just taking those steps forward and holding yourself accountable, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Yep. Now, this whole part of the conversation started about loss.
Right.
And I'm almost wondering if a part of why you continue to show up and do the things you do and continue to build confidence is because there are people who used to be in your life who can no longer do those things
100%.
because they're no longer here. Would you mind talking a little bit about that? You can keep it at a high level if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's actually funny because I know we had to reschedule this podcast once, and I saw you had June 6th on your calendar, and I was like, that's an amazing day for this. And for obvious reasons. And if you guys don't know, today's D Day, right? Or the anniversary G Day, I think 79th anniversary. And today, just like Memorial Day does, and every day, quite frankly, for me, and you hit the nail on the head with like, those people inspire me on a daily basis. And I think today was a great day for this podcast because we can talk about it at this point in time, right? And having individuals that I've lost, that we've lost as a country, that have been the example of bravery, courage, and commitment, right? That we talked about and have paid the ultimate price for it, is the exact reason that I keep pushing as hard as I do. And there are friends, personal friends of mine that I've lost, that are teammates that I've lost, And there are guys, back in World War II, on a day like today, and for years of World War II, that have lost their lives, putting themselves out there and committing their whole selves, right, to a cause greater than themselves, right. And that's what I want to do on a daily basis, is work my ass off and help others do the same and embody the same mentality to commit themselves to that level of purpose and be the person that, honestly, they died for, man. Like, and that's why it's like, if I live my life in any less fashion, like, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to every single individual, my closest friends that have died. And I just won't let myself do it. Right. And I don't think that you as an individual need to experience that kind of loss to understand that. Right. And Sean Ryan, actually, I just watched it the other day. He had a great recording of his Memorial Day speech. And he said, be an American that is worth dying for on a daily basis. And I think that it's so profound and so true, man. And that's what I think should drive everybody, that there are so many individuals that pay the ultimate sacrifice and going to loss and stuff, and like how we experience it. And even if we don't experience it directly, we can still hinge off of that loss and that level of sacrifice and commitment towards our own lives, and be better every day for it.
Mm. I think that's such an admirable way to look at the world. And I'm almost wondering if there are days where that drive, that desire to live for these people that are not here anymore is also paired with a deep sadness of not having them here. And does that hit you still, all these years later, of not having these people with you?
It absolutely does, man. Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, there's not a day that goes by where, like, there isn't some sense of that pops up, in my mind, and there are, again, days that I'm like, I'm tired. Like, I don't want to do this, or my anger's peaking for whatever reason. And I got to take a step back and realize, that I can be better in these situations. And, like, I got to cool myself down sometimes, or I got to get my ass off the couch. You know what I mean? And do what I said I was going to do. Right. And I think on a daily basis, I experience that, and it's a good thing. You know what I mean? Because I think that it's a huge driving factor in living the life that you intended to live, right? And they want you to live, right? Whether they be your best friend or somebody that just, doesn't even know you, but like paid the price for it. So
Yeah, that's beautifully said.
appreciate it.
Now, of course, now loss is something that you have not chosen for yourself, but you've experienced. Is there a moment in life, a season in life, a chapter in your life story that has been the hardest that you have chosen?
Yeah, absolutely. With that, I actually want to bring it, like, you may be familiar with the term, like, Misogi, the Japanese term Misogi. And I freaking love the concept. And I haven't been great about it the last couple of years, but there was a period of 3 years ago, and I've highlighted on my social media account, but there was a period where I carried 125 pounds up a mountain, a mile up, a mile down for 31 days straight. And I was asked to do this mental endurance challenge and it was completely up to me via 10,000, as we're looking at, like, highlighting mental endurance. And it's something that I'm absolutely passionate about, as you're aware. And getting into that, I decided, I was like, you know what? Like, at the time, it was fresh off of Memorial Day, or thereabouts. It was actually the start of August, and I was dealing with a lot at that point in time. I only been out of the Navy a couple of years, and we can get into the whole transition conversation here in a little bit. But there's a period there where I was just dealing with a lot of struggle, a lot of lack of community, and just, like, I wouldn't even say, like, just general mental health struggle, but necessarily, it was more like needing a sense of purpose, and really, like, getting myself into an uncomfortable zone. So I chose to do this carry, as I titled it. And again, I was carrying a 100-pound sandbag with my body armor on, which is about 25 pounds. And I decided to commit to it for 31 days straight. And if anybody's throwing on 100 pounds on their back, it's fucking miserable to stand there with it. Right. So I decided that to put myself in this uncomfortable situation, right, and really highlight mental endurance, but also mental endurance towards what we carry on a daily basis, right? And that's why I called it that, for a couple of reasons, right? But um, it really was trying to highlight that purpose of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, and really shouldering the weight and continuing to move forward no matter how bad it got. And it actually got really shitty at one point, because 15 days in, I rolled my ankle. I mean, with 100 and some pounds on my back, right? And it was not good. Like, it fucking swelled up, perp black and blue. And I was like, well, I got to do it tomorrow. So I went out to CVS. I got a rigid splint brace, and I threw it on my ankle, iced the shit out of it, did some hot cold therapy to it, and got back on the mountain the next day. And it took me about damn near double the time. but I kept moving. And that was the highlight for me in that. And it's something that I would, love to project to other people too, of like, no matter how bad it may get, like I would say, bar like losing your leg, right? Like you have the ability to keep moving forward every single day, no matter what the circumstances and the weight you're carrying. So that was what I did. And that's the situation that I put myself in. And it was brutal, man. It was, 31 days of just being brutally sore, rolled ankles, like waking up every day going, damn it, I have to do this. And it's like 5 in the morning and I'm hitting it early morning before I hit work, you know what I mean? And got it done though, 31 days straight. And the last day I actually put in an extra 25 pounds on the back just to like beat myself down a little bit more. And that sucked because I didn't test my gear as best as I should have. And like that, my plate carrier was riding up into my throat because there was an extra weight in my back. And I was like, well, this sucks, but I want to do it anyways. So yeah, that would be the situation I put myself in on purpose. That's why I did it. So.
Mm. After those 31 days, was there a big takeaway from all of that that you either didn't know before or it was reinforced for you at the end of that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it was honestly, it was a sense of capability again. I was out of the SEAL teams and hadn't had the sense of hard work like that in a little while, right? And I knowingly put myself in this situation, right? And funny enough, to the situation in terms of like dealing with mental struggles, and it was unplanned completely on my end, but I actually was hit with a divorce the night before I left for the first one. And so that was just like a gut punch out of nowhere. So it was honestly like kind of a beautiful moment for that whole month because I was able to like consistently go do something that was brutally hard on my body, but also mentally, right? But also gave me the opportunity to like process what I was going through and the life changes that I was about to get myself into. Again, unintentionally, but nonetheless, like it was, kind of a burden on burden. And it was pretty awesome to do, honestly, because I think that if I hadn't had that outlet, honestly, like the physical and mental outlet, that it probably would have been harder. Like the actual like duration of the carry would have been harder. Like dealing with the divorce would have been harder. So I think I learned a lot from it, man. I learned a lot about physical capabilities again, putting myself back in that situation, and saying, yeah, I can still do this, right? And like there's no doubt in my mind. And I'll be 60, 65, 70 years old, still doing the same kind of shit, no doubt in my mind. But yeah, I learned a lot from it on all fronts. And I think that if anybody's out there and they're looking to test themselves, I would absolutely recommend finding something that you feel like in lines with Misogi, right? Of just like, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to go do it anyways, right? And
Mm.
then, if you're dealing with struggles too, I think physical outlets are an absolutely amazing opportunity to cleanse the mind and process and think. Because I think that's why like a lot of like our thoughts and our best thoughts honestly come from those moments of clarity.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to make a connection here, and we don't have to go too far into the first part of this connection,
Sure.
but I'm imagining that some of the loss that you've experienced while during your time serving our country, which by the way, thank you so much for that.
I appreciate the
Um,
support, man.
of
Definitely.
course. Some of that loss, you had to continue moving forward. You had no choice. You were in circumstances where you couldn't slow down and stop and go through a grieving process. You had to move forward. And the night before you started this challenge, you were presented with this news, this divorce,
Mm-hmm.
this again loss of a relationship. Do
Mm-hmm.
you feel that your time dealing with loss while serving our country helped you deal with this loss and continue to move forward without hesitation in that scenario?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good connection to draw. And to bring one more section where I didn't have the opportunity to, I guess, grieve. When I was in Afghanistan, we lost Extortion 17. Down there, we lost 31 SEALs and operators in one instance, and I had the distinct honor and opportunity to be in country at that point in time and to actually be at the memorial in Bagram and carry our brothers back onto the plane home. And at that point in time, there was no opportunity for that grieving process, right? And really, honestly, just process period, like what had just happened and what just happened in the community and stuff. And we were, in combat the next day. You know what I mean? So like it's right back to it. And quite frankly, in that situation, it's a beautiful outlet because it just fuels our fire, and we're able to get after the enemy and bring the hate that they deserve. So in that situation, it definitely taught me that move forward perspective. Um, and I think, again, beautiful parallel there, like drawing it back to like that situation in my divorce and stuff. It absolutely, I feel like it was a learning opportunity, in drawing it back to it was something that I didn't probably process at the time, but like that lesson learned of just saying, okay, cool, like this is a new chapter in my life, right? And I have my priorities and I know what they are. And my priorities, my main focus is my children, making sure that they're taken care of and comfortable and understand the situation as best as possible. And my ex actually does a great job with it too, of just making sure that they're like front side focus, right? That's all that matters, is making sure that they're taken care of. So again, kind of rehoning and just understanding that like, hey, this is a new chapter, and that's all it is, right? Like life has new chapters, period. Relationship, loss, everything, right? A sense of self. You may move careers, and it's like I don't know what to do with my life, and I went through that too, right? Like, what am I going to do? So it's just moving forward, man. It's just taking that step forward and saying, okay, cool, like I can process this. This is going to be a change, positive self talk again, and getting yourself into a positive mindset about what's coming and planning it out and processing it appropriately, and not letting the grief necessarily bog you down to a point where you're immobile and you're, on your heels essentially.
Speaking of that transition out of the Navy and figuring out what's next, what did that look like for you? What was that season like?
So that was another very challenging one, honestly. I made the decision personally, and I tell everybody this. I was at the peak of my career at the time when I left, which is like the oddest thing to say in my opinion, because like no one leaves a career when they're doing their best. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But the military is an oddity in that sense because you don't have, it's not like tomorrow I could leave or I'll choose it in a year. It's like you have enlistment cycles, right? So when you re-enlist, it's for years commitment, right? 1 to 6 years, I think, is the max you can do. And so when you make that commitment, you're in it. You're not getting out in 4 years and you're like, I'm just kind of sick of it, right? So you make these big commitments. And at the time, I had 2 children and a wife, of course, and I didn't want to get divorced at the time. And I wanted to be a present father there. And I had heard multiple horror stories about guys that, had done careers and stuff and had kids and they just didn't have good relationships. And with the kids, right? Or wives for that matter. And I was again at the kind of peak operating like ability in my career, and I had an enlistment coming up, and I needed to make a decision whether I needed to stay in or I got out. And I decided, because I had kids, I was like, this is probably a poor decision for me professionally, and I knew it was, but it was the right decision to make for my family, right? So I decided to make that decision, and I still hold firm that it was the right call. But getting out of that, I planned appropriately. Like it was not a shotgun decision by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that if you look at like my transition pathway from like being in the military to being out of the military, it was probably best case scenario that like a guy could ask for. I got out, I moved back to where I wanted to be, right? I bought a beautiful home. My kids are like strong and healthy. I got a good job, right? Like I had everything lined up for me, but what they don't talk about and what people rarely talk about until you're out and you're experiencing it is that loss, right? That sense of loss of community and your brothers and everything that you've been doing your entire life. And it probably is 10 times worse if you've done 20, 30 years, right? It's everything. And to me, it was everything. And it still is to this day. I mean, I wanted to be a SEAL since I was 8 years old, and then I finally went and did it and lived my dream. And then all of a sudden it's like that's ripped away from you in a little snapshot. And now you're like, well, now what? You know what I mean? And I could pull the easy button and so I'm gonna go contract or something like that. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to see what else was out there in the world, and understanding I made a decision for my kids, right, of being there. I didn't want to go back into something that I was gone 24/7 for. So I definitely gave it the best go I could. I feel like, and planned appropriately around what I was going to do and where I was going to be and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't really fill that void. So reaching out to my friends and again, just being open and honest, man, just talk, it's like, and I would talk to friends and I had a couple other friends. I mentioned my friend that runs the Spanish strategies group and he got out like for shortly after I did. And we were both going through the same stuff and we had multiple phone calls, man. Like this sucks. Like this is like not what we thought it would be. This is hard. We're dealing with civilians now in the workplace that is in no way, shape, or form representative of what we just spent our a decade plus like putting ourselves through and operating in. So it's a massive shift, in mentality and leadership style and all this kind of stuff. And and falling into something, which is my first job out. I was working as a program manager for a surveillance company that like was building this pretty cool sensor for pre-shot sniper detection. And I was a sniper in the SEAL team, so like it was a good parallel for me to jump into. But it's still like I'm running this team of individuals that have no military background, right? They have no sense of like, in my opinion, right, like the urgency and the just the mentality that we do and everything that we operate in. So it was just a massive shift in all fronts. And then all of a sudden I was home all the time too, on top of that. Right. So now it's like I'm dealing with never being home and I'm always home. So it's like it was fun for a while and then it got to a point and it's not no hit to anybody that I was there with, but at the same time, it was just a massive shift. So it went really well and I feel like I'm thriving today, but it took me quite a while to like hone in on my purpose. And I was actually asked a question while I was going through the Honor Foundation, which is a transition program they have for special operators, and they're like, "What are you passionate in?" And I don't have an answer, man. I
Mm.
never had an answer for that because I was like, man, I'm passionate in what I'm doing. I'm passionate in like in my job now. That's what I've always wanted to do. So like when they're like, what are you passionate in? I'm like, I don't know. I threw my hands up in the air, like Ricky Bobby, like I don't know, do with my hands. Like I'm sitting here like I don't know. And it took me years to figure out like what I'm actually passionate in. And it comes down to the human performance and like mindset training and really like making an individual the best person that they can possibly be in their world, right? Because
Mm.
nobody like I'm not gonna like go to an operator and be like, hey, let me help you out, right? But like because they already got that shit dialed. But like individuals across the board can always operate better, and there's some guys that may need that, right? They may need to rehone on like what they did in their past life and like kind of get that fire in their gut again to like get after it and build habits and discipline, right? And that consistency and the confidence and really to be the best man they can be across the board. So that's kind of what I've like landed in and what I'm passionate about. It's all been a pretty wild transition process, in my opinion, to be able to like hone in on that. But I feel like I'm finally kind of figuring it out a little bit. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the life transition stuff is no joke. It's not easy to give up everything you've known for such a long time to come to almost a different extreme, being overseas, fighting for our country, being back home, learning how to readjust. I can't imagine that's anywhere close to easy. There's this Japanese proverb that goes, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yes,
And I'm almost wondering if this is your garden. You're back
exactly.
home, you're in Montana, and you're still a warrior at heart, but you're living in a garden. Is that how you feel?
I do, man. It's actually funny you bring that up, and I've just looked at that not too long ago, and I've heard it before, and I love it every time I read it. And I think that's a really good way of putting it because I never that was one thing that I knew that I would never sacrifice is my capabilities, my physical capabilities, my mental capabilities. I was never going to let myself degrade to a point where I was not capable of that level. So if I was ever asked, like get back into the fight or anything like that, that I was 100% capable right now, and that's where I wanted to be. And I wanted to make sure that, again, like I said, I never lose that. Right. So I think that what you just said is exactly right. Like I feel like I'm that warrior in the garden, right? And I'm always capable of hitting that and being at my best. And I would go toe to toe with any individual out there right now, even today. And I've been out of the military for almost 7 years now. So like, and that's it's just like a standard that I hold for myself.
Yeah. Earlier in the conversation, you used the word enemy, and I don't think that's a word most people think of on a day-to-day basis. At
Mm.
least, as a civilian, I'll say I don't think of the word enemy often. The enemy overseas, I think, has to probably be pretty clear to you. You know who you're fighting against, and maybe
Right.
there are things, you don't know where they are exactly or they're disguised, but you generally know who the enemy is. If you had to say, who's the enemy here at home, and not so much from this group or that person, but
Person. Right. Right.
this temptation or this excuse, or what is the enemy in your life right now as it stands here at home?
So I would say that I wouldn't necessarily say like I wouldn't hone in on like I have an enemy that I'm like actively mentally fighting, but I would say that for any individual right now, the enemy's you, right? Like your internal demons, right, are your enemy, right? And like that, as Joe Rogan would say, like the inner bitch, right? That's your enemy. And
Mm.
I think that's the fight that we all have to like acknowledge, right? And like and continue to press the envelope on every single day is really making sure that we don't allow ourselves to degrade. Like I said, we don't allow ourselves to become less than we desire to be, right? And as long as we can continue to fight that enemy internally, right, in a positive sense, right? I don't mean to like degrade ourselves or anything like that, but like just understand that those negative thoughts in your head and that those moments of weakness, and then we all have them. I have them every single day, right? You have to combat that with like the right mentality and always understand that that is the enemy that we have to overcome on a daily basis to be our best selves. So I would say that for me, that's still that challenge, right? I mean, it doesn't go away just because like you have an individual out there that's just like operating like at their peak, they're crushing it and stuff. I guarantee you, they still have those days, they still have those thoughts, and they just handle them better than another individual does. And that's the difference between success in an individual and not necessarily failure, but lacking the ability to become your whole self.
Mm. A good friend of mine, Chris Kabayan, shared a reflection with me this week, and he said, just because someone carries it well doesn't mean that it's not heavy. And
Yeah.
I think what you said, right, that you have those moments of weakness, you have those moments where that enemy, that voice is present, and you choose not to give in, you choose to be
Mm-hmm.
strong, right? People would look at you from the outside, I'm assuming, and think, man, he never has those moments of weakness. He's got it all
Yeah.
together. But the truth is, as human beings, we all have those things, and you're choosing to carry it well. It doesn't mean that it's not heavy.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Well said. I absolutely do. Just to reiterate that point, I absolutely have those on almost a daily basis where I have to prioritize what's important, right? And fight that inner dialogue of maybe I'm tired, I'm sore, I don't feel good that morning, I didn't get as much sleep as I wanted to, whatever it may be, and really just holding fast to your commitment. As we talked about before, there's actually an endurance athlete that said something to the effect of like, it doesn't hurt less just because of who I am, right? But I just handle it better than you do.
Mm.
And I think that goes to kind of like endurance, right? Like that in looking at that and saying that like when you can understand that the weight is heavy for all of us, it's just about how you mentally process it. That's the difference, right? That's the difference in like being able to succeed in a situation and then like letting that inner voice take over and it leading to failure, right? It's like it's how do you process it? How do you carry that weight? And it's I guarantee you some it may be lighter than others, but like those individuals like you can tell, man, like they're carrying it, but they're still moving forward. Like that's what it's all about, just
Yeah.
processing and carrying it.
Yeah. I think you answered my next question before I even asked it, which is beautiful. Do you have anything else to add to what the word endurance means to you?
Yeah, I mean, just to that point, I mean, I think that it's really about the mental ability to continue to keep moving forward through pain and adversity. And no matter what that is, like a setback in your job, like again, a bum ankle, whatever it may be, endurance is that ability to just keep moving forward. Because you'll see it in endurance sports, right? I mean, guarantee that those guys that run those 100-mile races, man, they're hurting from mile 5. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
starts to suck early and they just keep going, right? Like, and they just keep processing it and keep moving forward. And that's what endurance really comes down to. It's not necessarily, I mean, it does like transition into the physical, right? You can build muscular endurance and all that kind of stuff, as we all know. But when it comes down to it, it's mental, right? And that's what I mean in the teams like going through buds, man. You'll hear it time and time again from anybody who's gone through it. It's 90% mental, 10% physical. Like you can get the biggest, and I've seen it firsthand, the biggest stud out there. Like that guy's an animal, man. But guess what? Like he crumbles and fails and he quits. And it's the guys that maybe they aren't like the biggest studs in the world, man. They just have the mental game over those guys. It doesn't matter if they failed. It doesn't matter if they're hurting that day. They just
Mm.
keep moving forward. And it seems to be the theme of the conversation, but it really is, man. It's just like it's carrying the weight and moving forward, man, every step of the way. And that's what endurance actually means, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that definition. And I would also add for people listening who maybe feel like they are handling something hard that they didn't
Mm-hmm.
choose, and that they have a choice right now to choose endurance, to carry the weight well, to stand tall, that it is bigger than just us. And for me, in my life, there have been struggles that I had to grapple with for a long time before I came to this conclusion. And I
Mhm.
hope that this conversation can help somebody get there a lot more quickly than I did.
Agreed.
But there's a privilege when it comes to the hard things. There's a privilege to pain and getting to carry something hard, getting to handle something that you didn't ask for. You get to be an example for the people around
Mhm.
you, and the way you act, the way you choose to move forward or not carries a whole lot more weight to the people around you when you're handling something hard. And so it's a privilege to get to walk through that and try
Agreed.
to carry that weight well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that too, when you are going through those struggles and you have the ability to be that example, like you mentioned, right? And I think it's a lot of it is about how you project that confidence, right? That you gain from your hard experiences and helping others like do the same. Because I could look down on the person and be like, "That's not hard," like suck it up. And that's not necessarily always the right mentality, right? It's understanding and trying to be empathetic in the sense of understanding what they're going through, and that it may not be hard to you because maybe you've shouldered more than they have, but it's hard to them. You know what I mean? So like as a mentor, as a coach, anything like that, I think like really trying to put yourself in their shoes and understanding that like, hey man, this is challenging, and like you can be a positive mentor in that situation of just making sure that you're again empathetic and understanding and open to talk and push them where necessary, and let them understand that like, hey, you can get through this. It may not be my situation, but like, hey, we're all here for each other, and building community is one of the most important things to me.
Yeah, and to that point, hard is relative and struggle is struggle. And whether it looks like going overseas and dealing with loss or coming back home and dealing with loss, right? I think the human condition is special because at its core, we all share the same emotions.
Mhm.
Whatever the struggle looks like on the surface, I think there's some part of each of us that can relate, even if it looks so different, out here, on the
For sure.
surface. So with that being said, before we go to the last and final question, I worked some magic and I did find the quote. I confirmed that this was a video of you on social media,
Yeah.
paired with this quote that resonated so deeply with me, and it was the reason why I ended up reaching out to you. So
Awesome.
the quote is from Jacob A. Reese, and it goes, "When nothing seems to help, I go and look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock, perhaps
Yes.
100 times without as much as a crack showing in it. Yet at the 101st blow, it will split in two, and I know it was not that last blow that did it, but all that had gone before."
100%. Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
That right there is perseverance, man. That is that commitment to work. Honestly, that is that commitment to what, again, like what we talked about, like setting yourself up and like driving forward to the commitment you set for yourself. And even if it's not working for you, doesn't matter if it doesn't work for 100 times, right? Like just keep grinding at it, and you will get better. I guarantee you, every single failure you experience, that you are absolutely getting better every single time. And I haven't talked about it yet, but like doing jujitsu is exactly that. Like you're gonna suck. You're gonna get your ass handed to you right off the bat. But it's like it's showing up, it's being committed, and it's grinding. It's beating that stone over and over and over again until you actually get through and you figure it out, right? And there's no end to that. And that's the thing, man. It's like you break one stone, there's another one waiting for you, and you gotta go break that one. So like that quote, I mean, it is super powerful, and I'm really glad you brought that up because I was in my head. I was like, I wonder if it was that one. I couldn't remember the whole thing, so I'm glad you read it. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely that perseverance, through adversity and through what you look at as like this isn't working, but it's your commitment, it's your desire, it's your goal, your passion, and it's your dream, right? Just keep hammering at it, and I guarantee you, if you work hard enough, it will absolutely break for you, and you're going to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, yeah. Couldn't say it better than that. And I think perseverance, persistence, determination, all of those qualities culminate together. That quote, and there's another quote which is one of my favorites from James Watkins: "A river cuts through rock not because of
Mm,
its power, but because of its persistence." And I just think that too many people give up on things because it doesn't
absolutely.
work on the first try or the second try. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Definitely, man.
Um, so as we land this plane of a conversation, I know that, so you're a dad, and
Yeah.
this question, meets people at different places in life, but I would love for you to imagine that you get to speak the answer to this question to your sons at a time. You have two sons, did you say?
Two sons and a daughter. Yeah.
Oh, and a daughter. So your
Yeah.
two sons and a daughter at a time in their life when they really, really need it. So the context here is everybody listening to this podcast is dealing with something. Might be big, might be small, might be chosen, might be unchosen. If somebody's going through a very tough season of life at the moment and they get to listen to you speak here for a few minutes, what would you say to them?
That's a great question, man. And related to my kids, I think it's pretty powerful too, because as I would relate it to them directly, I would say that I'm always there for them. And I would relate that to other people as well, because when I look at that, I think it really comes down to seeking community and realizing that you're never alone. And as you go through hard struggles, whether it be physical in nature or mental, no matter if you feel alone, like there's always somebody there that is available to listen. And again, relating it back to my kids, like I am fully committed in every sense of the word to being there for them for the longevity of my life. And if I can impart the understanding to them and to anybody else that community and the environment you build around you and the people that you choose to hold around you are one of the most important things that you can possibly do, and understanding that they're always there to truly talk to yourself, to talk to, and then you can talk to yourself about it as well, and really just be that presence, for individuals, for other people. And again, just really like fostering your environment and community, man, and being there for people. I think that is one of the key components to getting through struggles in life, and understanding that you're never alone in something.
I think that's the message that somebody, if not many people, needed to hear, and I'm thankful for you sharing that.
Definitely.
And before we wrap this up and put a bow on it, is there anything else you'd like to share that we didn't get to through the conversation?
I don't think so, man. I think this has been a pretty powerful conversation, at least for me, and it's been an awesome opportunity to like open up and kind of get into some of the struggles and stuff that we all deal with. And there's it's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, man. And there's so much more to dealing with struggles and stuff like that, and kind of like the mentality around it, and how we process life and everything like that. But I think this conversation has been, at least for me, like very, very profound, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share my experiences with you guys, and yeah, and just be present for everybody.
Yeah, I'm just as grateful. And, I want people to be able to reach out and follow along with everything you have going on. So where can people find you? And just let me say this first. Your Instagram handle is the perfect match for you. So where
Appreciate
can
that.
people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram primarily. I don't do any other social accounts. My handle's BeardedBeast8. So yeah, I would just protect anybody out there that wants to chat, has questions, anything like that. Reach out to me, DM me at any point in time. I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk, and just help people through anything, whether it be like a workout program or life challenges or just a general question on anything. Like I definitely, again, want to put out there, again, my passion and stuff is really just helping people perform at their optimal level, right? So human performance and mindset. And that's what it all comes down to. So yeah, find me at Beard B State on Instagram. Hit me up anytime and we can chat. It's been a
Where
pleasure.
It's been a pleasure too. One last question.
Yeah, shoot.
Where does the eight come from?
So my birthday is 8/8/86. It's kind of always been like this go to number for me. So that's kind of why. Yeah.
Okay.
No other reason.
It all makes sense. That's a good reason.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, thank you again for this. I appreciate you more than you realize, and can't wait to
Same,
talk
man.
soon.
Yeah, definitely, dude. Thanks for the opportunity, and I really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.